In Warsaw we call it kwadrans akademicki, the academic quarter, but I know that in Israel they call it Jewish time. So we are ahead of Jewish time. We are 5 minutes before the moment we should start the conference, but nevertheless I would prefer to punish those who come late rather than those who came on time. I am Dariusz Stola and I am the director of the Museum of the History of Polish Jews, and I have this incredible pleasure to welcome all of you. Those who don't understand English may listen to the translation in Polish, but in a second I will switch to my mother tongue, to Polish, and make the official introduction in Polish. Zatem oficjalne powitanie, proszę Państwa, które chciałbym jako dyrektor tej instytucji właśnie uczynić, będzie w języku polskim. Jestem zaszczycony i ja, i wszyscy moi koledzy pracujący w muzeum jesteśmy zaszczyceni Państwa obecnością. Jest to niezwykła konferencja, aczkolwiek nie wszyscy z jej uczestników zdążyli jeszcze dotrzeć na ten moment otwarcia, ale nieomal wszyscy, za wyjątkiem bodajże 3 osób, które niestety w ostatniej chwili musiały zrezygnować, potwierdzili udział i będą. I wydaje się, że będzie to przynajmniej największa od wielu, wielu lat historia gromadząca badaczy zajmujących się historią polskich Żydów. Więc spotkanie wydaje mi się zupełnie wyjątkowe z tego powodu, a po drugie dla pracowników muzeum, a także dla tych wszystkich, którzy przyczynili się do jego powstania, a na tej sali jest takich osób wiele, jest to wyjątkowy moment, kiedy można się pochwalić i wspaniałą wystawą stałą i przepięknym budynkiem, w którym będą odbywały się nasze posiedzenia. Konferencja ta powstała w wyniku współpracy Muzeum POLIN, Żydowskiego Instytutu Historycznego i Fundacji Taubego, dzięki grantowi pana Williama Bowsa, za pośrednictwem Stowarzyszenia Żydowski Instytut Historyczny. Tutaj może dodam dla tych, którzy nie wiedzą, że właśnie wystawa stała powstała staraniem Stowarzyszenia Żydowski Instytut Historyczny poprzez grupę najwybitniejszych historyków, a także naukowców z innych dziedzin, którzy przy jej powstaniu brali udział. Moja rola przy tym była ograniczona, także w tej chwili, kiedy zbieram rozliczne pochwały z całego świata dotyczące wystawy czy muzeum, to tylko powtarzam, że przekażę je tym, którym się należą, a tak się składa, że wiele z tych osób jest dzisiaj właśnie na sali. Nie chciałbym zabierać wiele czasu, po mnie głos zabierze jeszcze profesor Śpiewak, profesor Poloński, Szanapen z Fundacji Taubego, a potem będziemy mieli okazję wysłuchać profesor Barbary Kirshenblatt-Gimblett z wykładem wprowadzającym. Chciałbym więc tylko powitać, widziałem na sali pana Jerzego Halberstadta, wieloletniego dyrektora tego muzeum w budowie, osobę chyba najbardziej zasłużoną dla powstania tej instytucji. Bardzo się cieszę, że jest dzisiaj z nami. Chciałbym powitać też panów Orzechowa i Ulatowskiego, wieloletnich darczyńców naszego muzeum, dzięki którym możemy realizować wiele projektów. Widziałem też panią Grażynę Pawlak, matkę założycielkę, jeśli tak można powiedzieć, idei tego muzeum. Będziemy mieli w trakcie okazję także gościć kilka innych znaczących osób. Nie wiem, nie miałem okazji spojrzeć w ostatniej chwili, czy już weszli na salę, to znaczy ambasador Chodorowicz, ambasador Polski w Izraelu i pani Aleksandra Bugajlijskis, ambasador Kanady w Polsce. Jeśli jeszcze ich w tej chwili nie ma, to zjawią się wkrótce. Chciałbym też powitać oficjalnych przedstawicieli Stowarzyszenia Żydowski Instytut Historyczny, czyli pana Piotra Wiślickiego, które tutaj widzę, oraz pana Mariana Turskiego, przewodniczącego Rady Muzeum, którzy, jak już powiedziałem, ponoszą gro odpowiedzialności za kształt tak powszechnie chwalonej wystawy stałej. Proszę Państwa, nasza konferencja jest dosyć długa i intensywna, dlatego do tych oficjalnych powitań chciałbym od razu z góry dodać prośbę, którą komitet organizacyjny oraz Małgorzata Pakier, moja koleżanka, która za stronę organizacyjną odpowiada, prosili mnie o powtórzenie, o zachowanie dyscypliny czasowej, tak żebyśmy mieli prawdziwe, długie przerwy kawowe w trakcie naszego spotkania. Jak wiadomo, przerwy kawowe są najważniejszą częścią każdej konferencji. Wtedy można spotkać kolegów, porozmawiać o tym, co jest nowego w naszych badaniach. W swoich teczkach mają Państwo kompletną informację na temat, co się dzieje, którego dnia, o której godzinie. Bardzo proszę, żeby się z tym zapoznać. Niektóre wydarzenia mają miejsce poza muzeum albo w dosyć dziwnych porach, także bardzo proszę sprawdzić, żeby to Państwo nie umknęło. Na zakończenie tego mojego krótkiego i na pół organizacyjnego wstępu chciałbym wszystkim życzyć udanych obrad, chciałbym życzyć Państwu owocnej wymiany myśli, tak żeby to muzeum, które powstało dzięki współpracy naukowców z bardzo wielu różnych krajów, głównie historyków, ale nie tylko, bez tego gigantycznego wysiłku intelektualnego, który został w muzeum włożony, z pewnością nie byłoby tak dobre, jak jest. I mówię to nie jako człowiek nieskromny, ale jako ktoś, kto czyta opinie mediów, opinie fachowców muzealników, którzy nas odwiedzają i powszechnie to muzeum chwalą. Bez wątpienia, bez tej gigantycznej i podkreślam zespołowej pracy bardzo wielu ludzi, którzy potrafili się porozumieć, którzy potrafili w drodze dyskusji znajdować wspólne wnioski o tym, co w historii polsko-żydowskiej jest ważne i jak to można pokazać. Bez tego wieloletniego, kooperatywnego wysiłku to z pewnością nie byłoby możliwe i chcielibyśmy, żeby teraz muzeum w jakimś niewielkim chociaż stopniu mogło to zwrócić, pomagając w organizacji takiej konferencji, która, jak mam nadzieję, przysłuży się do dalszego rozwoju studiów polsko-żydowskich. Dziękuję Państwu zatem za uwagę i chciałbym teraz oddać głos profesorowi Pawłowi Śpiewakowi.
Dzień dobry Państwu. Ja jestem dyrektorem Żydowskiego Instytutu Historycznego imienia Emanuela Ringelbluma. Muszę powiedzieć, że to jest niezwykłe wydarzenie, którego jestem świadkiem i któremu będę towarzyszył przez najbliższe dni. To znaczy takiego zgromadzenia, tak cudownego zgromadzenia badaczy, uczonych, ludzi zainteresowanych historią Żydów polskich w tym gmachu nie było, w tym nowym gmachu, który jest cudnym, że tak powiem, projektem architektonicznym, wielkim projektem artystycznym, jeśli chodzi o wystawę. Jestem niezwykle, że tak powiem, dumny z tego i cieszę się, że powstał taki projekt dzięki Grażynie Pawlak ze stowarzyszenia, która ten pomysł wymyśliła. Ten pomysł się, jak rozumiem, rodził gdzieś między Stowarzyszeniem a Żydowskim Instytutem Historycznym, a potem znalazł wielkie uznanie przede wszystkim u 3 polskich prezydentów, co jest niezwykłe, że ci prezydenci zazwyczaj chyba dosyć się nie lubili i dosyć byli kłótliwi, natomiast jeśli chodzi o w jednym punkcie byli zgodni. Tym jedynym punktem, którym byli zgodni, to jest to, że to muzeum musi powstać. To jest jakby wielkie wydarzenie, że paradoksalnie to muzeum połączyło. No ale ono powstało przede wszystkim dzięki w dużej mierze dzięki fundatorom. Lista imponująca jest tutaj na ścianie, naprawdę imponująca. No i powstała wysiłkiem dziesiątek, jeżeli nie więcej osób, prawda? Ja reprezentuję instytut, który jest trochę starszy, bo ma tak mniej więcej lekko ponad 70 lat. Oficjalnie za 2 lata będzie obchodził oficjalne 70-lecie i który jest jedyną instytucją żydowską, która trwa nieprzerwanie tak długo od czasu wojny. Jest jedyną instytucją badawczą, historyczną żydowską, powstałą pod egidą Centralnego Komitetu Żydów Polskich, który żywot swój zakończył, ten komitet, w 1950 roku. Tam zresztą w Centralnym Komitecie, w budynku, w którym się mieścimy, 500 metrów stąd, może 700, otwarta została w 1947 roku pierwsza wystawa poświęcona artystom żydowskim, którzy zginęli w czasie wojny. Tam też po raz pierwszy pokazane zostały akwarele Geli Szekstein. Także to muzeum w tej bardzo skromnej formie istniało w budynku Żydowskiego Instytutu Historycznego, no ale ten budynek, ten projekt, ten oddech, który tutaj jest, pozwala uczynić z tego, powiedziałbym, nadać kształt, wielkość, imponującą wielkość temu pomysłowi Muzeum Historii Żydów Polskich. Cieszę się, że Żydowski Instytut Historyczny będzie mógł w tym projekcie tej konferencji uczestniczyć. Cieszę się, że wielu z naszych badaczy będą pełnili rolę speakerów, ale przede wszystkim jestem wdzięczny panu profesorowi Polonskiemu za zorganizowanie tej konferencji. Włożył w to naprawdę wiele trudu i cieszę się obecnością tak wielu, tak wybitnych uczonych, badaczy, historyków sztuki, historyków, antropologów. Bardzo dziękuję wam za przyjazd i mam nadzieję, że na tej konferencji wszyscy będziemy mieli z niej radość i intelektualną przyjemność. Dziękuję bardzo.
Dziękuję bardzo i proszę o zabranie głosu profesora Antoniego Polońskiego, przewodniczącego komitetu tej konferencji i głównego historyka naszego muzeum.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, as we begin this impressive conference in these remarkable surroundings, I remember the earlier conferences which preceded it from the early 1980s and which paved the way for the revival of the study of the history and culture of the Jews of Poland, Lithuania and its successor states, which we will be reviewing in the next few days. I'm one of the small group here present which attended the conferences at Columbia in 1983, Oxford in 1984, Brandeis and Krakow in 1986, and Jerusalem in 1988. I believe the other three people in this position are Moshe Rossman, Israel Bartal, and Wladek Bartoszewski, although there may be others in the room who are also in this position. I should add that the organizer of the conference held in 2009 in Jerusalem on the 25th anniversary of the Oxford Conference, Danny Blattman, is also with us today. I should therefore like to recall the names of some of those who participated in these events, which for historians allowed us to witness something which it was a privilege for historians to see history actually being made in front of our eyes and who are no longer with us. Jerzy Tomaszewski, a pioneer of the study of the Polish-Jewish past. Israel Gutman, Warsaw Ghetto fighter, Auschwitz survivor, great historian, one of the pioneers of Polish-Jewish understanding. Chona Szmeruk, a pioneer of the study of Yiddish and Polish-Jewish relations. Jan Bloński, a major Polish literary figure and a critic and a key figure in the reassessment of the Polish-Jewish past. Jerzy Turowicz, longtime editor of Tygodnik Powszechny, a man who played a crucial role in Polish-Jewish and Christian-Jewish understanding. Władysław Bartoszewski died only a few days ago, one of the towering figures in Polish life, founder of Żegota, indomitable fighter for freedom and democracy, and a highly successful foreign minister. Józef Gierowski, creator of the Center for the Study of the History and Culture of Polish Jews at the Jagiellonian University. Jakob Goldberg, a 1968 immigrant and a great historian of the early modern period of Polish-Jewish history. Lucjan Dobroszycki, another 68er and another key figure in Polish-Jewish history. Leszek Kolakowski, great philosopher, architect of one of the architects of Polish democracy, another 1968er, and Lukasz Yeshowicz, longtime editor of Soviet Jewish Affairs, another 1968er. There's also Szymon Abramski, professor of Jewish history at University College London. Józef Lichten, pioneer in the study of Jewish integration in Poland. Józef Karlinski, key figure in Polish London. Raphael Scharf, Krakowian and tireless activist for Polish-Jewish understanding. Salo Baron, first person to hold a chair in Jewish history in the United States. There'll be a conference devoted to his 120th birth date in end of this month, who participated in the Columbia Conference. And Zenon Gulden, a major scholar of Jews in pre-modern Poland-Lithuania. I'd also like to recall two persons who contributed to the process of the recovery of the Polish-Jewish past, but only became engaged in it later. Felix Tich, former director of the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw, and Andrzej Garlicki, one of the great experts on 20th century Polish history and a doctoral supervisor of a number of those in this room today, including myself. None of us who were present at those conferences could have hoped in our wildest dreams that a little more than 30 years later, communism in Poland would have ceased to exist, that the democratic system would be firmly established, and that we would be meeting in this museum whose core exhibition reflects the enormous amount of research into the Polish-Jewish past which has taken place in the last 3 decades. I'm only sorry that they cannot all be with us to witness this miraculous development. As chair of the committee which planned the conference, I should like most heartily to thank all its members for their assistance in putting together our program, and in particular, the 2 other members with me of the executive committee, Hanna Węgrzynik, Chief Specialist, Research and Historical Projects of the Museum, and Andrzej Szpikowski of the Jewish Historical Institute, who have worked tirelessly to bring us to where we are this afternoon. I'd also like to thank Professor Dariusz Stoller, Director of the Museum, and Professor Paweł Szpiewak, Director of the Jewish Historical Institute, for their constant encouragement and assistance. In addition, we owe a special debt of gratitude to Ted Toby, Chairman of the Toby Philanthropies, and Shana Penn, its Executive Director, for their continual help and counsel, and for the financial support provided by the Toby Foundation for Jewish Life and Culture and by the William K. Bowes Jr. Foundation. This assistance, as is well known, was provided in the framework of the museum's global educational outreach program, which we'll be discussing at the round table on Thursday evening. We're also greatly indebted to the program director of the permanent exhibition and now advisor to the director, Barbara Kirshenblatt-Gimblett, who's been an unfailing source of helpful suggestions in organizing the conference. The administrative staff of the museum have also worked tirelessly to ensure the smooth running of the conference, a very complicated and difficult logistical task. I should like particularly to thank Małgorzata Pakia, Director of the Research and Publications Department, Joanna Andryszek, Specialist in the Academic and Scholarly Program, and Jana Jaworowska of the Communications Department. We are very much hoping to publish the proceedings of this conference, and we'll be in touch with all of you on this matter in due course. This also means, as has already been stressed, that since we hope that the full account of what you want to say can be printed, you will keep, as far as it's possible, to the time limits which we've tried to set out. It remains only now for me to thank you all for coming to Warsaw and to wish us all fruitful discussions in the next 3.5 days. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję i chciałem teraz oddać głos pani Shanie Penn, dyrektorowi wykonawczemu Fundacji Taubego, która nie tylko przyczyniła się do tej konferencji, ale w ogóle do powstania naszej wystawy stałej. Bardzo proszę.
Thank you, Dariusz. I'm also delighted to welcome you to the conference on behalf of the sponsors, the William K. Bowes Foundation, the Toby Foundation for Jewish Life and Culture, and the Association for the Jewish Historical Institute of Poland. The Toby Foundation has long been an avid supporter of the vision of the core exhibition as articulated by Jerzy Halberstadt and Barbara Kirshenblatt-Gimblett. And we have proudly supported the exhibition plan as developed by the professional team of scholars, curators, and designers. Bravo to all. It's wonderful to be here together to be able to celebrate the core exhibition. In the 18 months or so while the core exhibition was being installed, Tad Toby and I asked how our foundation might be helpful to the museum in its next phase once it opened and was fully operational. We realized we might be most helpful by continuing the key relationship between Polish Jewish Studies scholarship and the core exhibition by reinforcing the museum's position as a location for ongoing Polish Jewish Studies discourse. And to that end, out of that notion, we in the museum formed the Global Education Outreach Program, GEOP, which aims to foster partnerships between the museum and academic and research institutions both internationally and in Poland, including, for example, the Jewish Historical Institute and the Polish Association of Jewish Studies. One of the GEOP's first major projects in partnership with the Jewish Historical Institute is this conference, which itself is most likely the first major international gathering largest international gathering of Polish Jewish Studies scholars in the last 75 years. We are proud to play a part in bringing all of us together to Warsaw to celebrate the core exhibition and to further discuss directions in the field of Polish Jewish Studies. And finally, a special thanks to Museum Director Dariusz Stoller, to Żych Jewish Historical Institute Director Paweł Szpiewak, to Chief Historian Antoni Polanski and Chief Curator Barbara Kirshenblatt-Gimblett. It's been a pleasure to cooperate with you all. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję. Proszę Państwa, kiedy różne osoby pytają mnie, jak muzeum powstało, to między innymi mówię, że powstało w wyniku serii cudów, bez których by się nie zdarzyło. O jednym z cudów wspomniał już profesor Śpiewak, to, że 3 prezydentów polskich, którzy w żadnej innej sprawie się nie zgadzali, w tej sprawie się zgadzali. Jednym z takich cudów jest to, że we właściwym momencie, kiedy muzeum tego potrzebowało, okazało się, że jest na świecie taka osoba, która łączy najwyższej klasy wiedzę na temat kultury i historii polskich Żydów z najwyższej klasy wiedzą na temat teorii muzeów i sztuki kuratorskiej. Tą osobą jest profesora Barbara Kirshenblatt-Gimblett, którą zapraszam teraz do wygłoszenia wykładu wstępnego. Barbara.
Thank you very much. If we could have the first slide, please. And also the remote control. Okay. It's not often that a museum makes history as well as chronicles it, and rare too when otherwise cautious observers remark at the opening of a new museum that it may prove a source of hope and pride that propels an entire society forward. Both of these things happened this week in Warsaw with the opening of POLIN Museum of the History of Polish Jews. And these are the words of Arnie Eisen, Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, shortly after the grand opening of the core exhibition on October 28th, 2014. And indeed, I think of this museum as an agent of transformation that can propel a whole society forward and as a bid for hope. And this is really central to our mission and central to the entire concept of the exhibition. We're gathered here today to take stock of the field of the history of Polish Jewish history and to set out future directions for research. And as Shana said, no doubt this is the largest conference on the history of Polish Jews to be convened in post-war Poland. Until now, we could talk about an exhibition in the making, about the plans for it. But now, this exhibition has opened, this is the grand opening, and this exhibition can now be really seen and discussed. And indeed, as you know from having visited it today, there are many, many visitors. In fact, I would say that there are probably 300,000 visitors in the course of the last 6 months since we opened the core exhibition, and we always projected about 500,000 visitors a year. These visitors are all ages. They're coming from across the world. I would say that between 60 and 70%, depending on the season, are coming from Poland, and the rest are coming from Israel, from the United States, other parts of Europe. And and our high season is just getting started. And we are an institution of public history. More people will see this museum than will ever read our books. And those of you who know what academic publishing is like know that our books, wonderful as they may be, were being printed in 1,000, 1,500 copies, and university presses in the US are now printing them in 400 and 500 copies. And so what that means is that we have a huge opportunity and we have a huge challenge to present the fruits of our scholarship to a wide and diverse public in an institution of public history. Now, who are these visitors and why are they coming? We have a little feedback station right as our visitors exit, and we're discovering that they are coming for an enormous range of reasons. Some are coming because they're simply curious and interested. Some were forced to come, but they said they found it very, very interesting. For some, it's because their roots are here in Poland or because their roots are Jewish. Many of them come and have the feeling that it deepens their sense of loss, so that for them the Holocaust is a very, very strong motivation. And this museum, even though the Holocaust is only one part of the 1,000-year history, that actually is, if you will, a message about the loss that is in fact intensified by their visit. I realize that there are many people here who are familiar with this project, and there are many who are not familiar with the project. And so what I'd like to do is very, very briefly give you a very, very quick history of the project, and then what I want to share with you is the backstory of the creating of the exhibition, from the master plan until the finished product that you see today. I'm often asked, well, who made this exhibition? How did it get made? So the evolution of the project is essentially the result of a unique public-private partnership between the Association of the Jewish Historical Institute of Poland, the City of Warsaw, and the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage. And the idea for the museum really emerged in 1993 when Grażyna Pawlak, who was then associated with the Association of the Jewish Historical Institute of Poland, experienced the new multimedia narrative exhibition at the Holocaust Museum in Washington. And it was her sense, and I think really it was a stroke of genius, that if there were a Holocaust museum in Washington, there should be a museum of the history of Polish Jews here in Poland. And this is a place where, more than anywhere else, that 1,000-year history has been largely overshadowed by the tragedy and the cataclysmic impact of the Holocaust. And so between 1993 and 2005, and it was only in 2005 that the agreement to form the museum as an institution was actually signed. Between those two periods, essentially, this was a project. It wasn't actually an institution. And as a project, it was very strongly supported by Sheike Weinberg. And then in 1996, between 1996 and 2011, it was led by Jerzy Halberstadt, who led it through each of the major stages of its development. The outline of the historical program, the development of a database, all the way through the master plan, scheme design, detail design, the architectural competition, all the way along. That was really through his vision, through his inspiration, and through his dedication. And so this is a project that you have to understand its location. Literally, we have built this museum on the rubble. The rubble of the ghetto as it looked after the Germans suppressed the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and the rubble of the city of Warsaw, 80% of which was destroyed after the Warsaw Uprising. And it's here that under communism, that the monument to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was unveiled on the rubble of the ghetto, and you can see the monument very high up in 1948 on the 5th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And this defines the location of this museum. And the land was identified here, and the monument there, and the architectural competition specified that the building must stand in a respectful relationship to the monument, which it does. This is the result of the first successful international competition for a public building in Poland, and the winner is Rainer Machlamaki, a Finnish architect, who produced an absolutely marvelous building that is a minimalist box on the inside, and all the drama, as you know from experiencing this building, is on the inside. And he clad it in glass. And I take that as really essentially the opposite of what we think of in terms of Holocaust museums, that this is a building that is full of light, transparency, reflection, and openness, which is really the DNA of the institution. And so here you get a sense of its relationship to the monument and the exhibition. We began from the rubble. We began without a collection, but we had the story. And for the Association of the Jewish Historical Institute of Poland, the initiator of the project, the story was everything. And so between 1996 and 2005, all the energy and the little bit of money that was available went to the telling of the story. And the idea was that this would be a multimedia narrative exhibition. It would be what I would call a theater of history. And you've already experienced it as a continuous visual narrative using the principle of narrative space. Now, objects are terribly important. We wish that we would be able to show more original objects. We do have a collection, and we are continuing to collect, and we are looking for ways to incorporate more original objects. But we didn't start from a collection, and we didn't have an obligation to tell the story through an existing collection. But more importantly, even if we had access to every single object related to the history of Polish Jews, we would not have been able to tell this story in the way that we have, basically and primarily through objects. Now, telling the story, we've often been asked precisely how did we arrive at the story and how did we essentially proceed? Well, the first is to realize there was a division of labor, that the city and the ministry were responsible for the building and for paying for the building and overseeing its construction, excuse me, and indeed, the money for the building came from the taxpayers' dollars and not from the European Union. But it was up to the association to raise the money for the exhibition. And that was a daunting task. I think it's unprecedented in Poland, this kind of partnership. And it's thanks to our donors, to the Toby Foundation, and to our other distinguished benefactors that we were able to raise the money to create this wonderful multimedia narrative exhibition, our Theater of History. Now, it's a grand collaboration. And what I would like to do is I would like to ask the following people to please stand up. First of all, our chief historians, Marcin Wodzinski and Antony Polonsky. I want you to stand and stay standing, please. I want our scholars to stand up. Sam, where are you? And Hannah, where are you? I want my scholars to stand up. Curators, I want you to stand up. And I want all of those who are here who helped us in any way, Chava Weissler and Shaul Stampfer and Moshe Rossman, and there are many, many, and Adam Teller is here, and David Asaf, I want you all to stand up. And any of our designers, any of our multimedia people, any of our managers, any of our whoever, because this was a massive, massive collaboration. And I want to personally extend my thanks to you for doing an absolutely splendid, splendid job. And I consider myself an akuszerka, a midwife. And so I feel that we have given birth to a very beautiful baby. And now we have to take very good care of it. That's our task going forward. And so this grand collaboration involved hundreds of people. It involved scholars, curators, designers, multimedia designers, fabricators. It really was an army. It took an army to really develop this exhibition. In the days to come, you will hear from the lead scholars exactly how their galleries developed. And what I think is really unusual in our case is that our historians, our scholars, first of all, it's interdisciplinary. So we had not only historians, but also one of our scholars is a social psychologist, another's a literary historian, another's a sociologist. That the multidisciplinary and international nature of the team was a great asset. But also, our scholars were not consultants. They were literally authors of the galleries for which they were responsible, and they were involved from beginning to end. And I think this is actually the key to the intellectual coherence of the entire exhibition. So now, basically, what are some of the principles that guided the historical narrative? Well, first of all, what is the most important period in the history of Polish Jews? I have often been asked that question, and usually the answer is Holocaust, post-war years, interwar years. Nobody ever says the Middle Ages, even though that's the first almost 600 years of our entire story. And so my answer is always, the most important period in the history of Polish Jews is 1,000 years. And it's an enormous message to communicate. 1,000 years of continuous Jewish presence in the place that became home to the largest Jewish community in the world and that became a center of the Jewish world. The second is that Jews are an integral part of Poland and that the history of Poland is not complete without a history of Polish Jews, that they are not only in Poland but also of Poland. And for these meta-historical principles, we are deeply indebted to Moshe Rossman, who has worked very, very closely with us. They created a civilization that he characterizes as being categorically Jewish and distinctly Polish, and that we tell the story in the very place where it happened. Now that might seem self-evident, but when I first presented this project in the United States especially, my Jewish audiences often said, "Why are you making it in Poland?" I said, well, where should I make it? They said, New York or Tel Aviv. Well, can you imagine this museum in New York or Tel Aviv? it wouldn't have nearly the impact that it has here in the very place where the largest Jewish community lived and died. And to tell this story here, to recover this 1,000-year history, which has been essentially lost to the Holocaust, along with 90% of the pre-war Jewish community, this is a moral responsibility, and we feel that the power of telling it here is absolutely unsurpassed. And we are a site of conscience. And our task, and this I think is really something very precious, our task is to create a trusted zone for engaging difficult subjects. And what this does is gives us an opportunity to use a principle that I would call constructive engagement, which is very different from the model of education that you get from Holocaust museums, which tends to work from the, if you will, from a completely different premise. So the idea of creating a trusted zone by creating I would say, a history that can be trusted, and within it, to open up a space for debate and dialogue about extremely difficult subjects. And so these are, I would say, some core principles that are at the heart of our project. What I'd like to do now is to give you a little bit of a sense, and this will be a kind of a leap from the very beginning to the very end, without all the steps in between. But how did we get from the outline of the historical program, which was developed under Jerzy Halberstadt with a team of Polish historians and also Michael Steinlauf, who was a very, very important consultant on this project from the very earliest stages. Marcin Wojcinski was also part of that team. A database of every conceivable kind of material, photographs, books, newspapers, objects, which Renata Pienkowska played a very important role in developing, and the master plan for the exhibition. In 2000, between 2000 and 2004, with the advice of Sheike Weinberg and under Jerz's direction, Event Communications, a design firm in London, really a state-of-the-art, world-class specialist in the developing of multimedia narrative exhibitions, developed a master plan. And after 2005, when the agreement was signed, in 2006, we were ready to take the master plan to the next stage. So the master plan really was taking the outline of the historical program, the material in the database, and it was suggesting a structure for the exhibition without knowing yet what the building would be, but just simply a structure for the exhibition, a set of principles, and some visualizations. And so this master plan, one of our first tasks in 2006, was to form the academic team as an international multidisciplinary team. And our first task was to evaluate the master plan and to agree on what we would accept and what we would change so that we could go to the next stage. Now, what's fascinating about the master plan, and this is actually what our concept diagrams look like, which is to say, putting the story in space. And I would warrant to say, and I think our scholars would agree, that it was a huge learning experience to take scholarship and to translate it into a visitor experience, and to work with materials that many historians don't generally work with, visual material, audiovisual material, and to do so in a way that is in our theater of history mode. Now, there were several aspects of the initial master plan that, for historiographic reasons, we wanted to change. And I would say, I don't know whether it's clear enough from this diagram, but essentially there were 3 tracks in this initial diagram in the master plan. One was called the Polish and European Historical Timeline. Then there was the Jewish track, and then there were trans-historical thematic galleries. And the first decision that we made was to integrate all 3 into one line. That is to say, that we decided that we did not want a European and Polish context into which we would then put our Jewish story. We wanted an integral story, a story that really communicated the idea that Jews are not only in Poland, but also of Poland, and that their history is an integral part of the history of Poland. So that was the first thing. The second is we wanted to avoid the idea of trans-historical thematic treatments of Judaism, women, the wedding, whatever it might be, but rather to integrate those themes, including themes such as anti-Semitism, themes such as Jewish religious life, to weave them in and integrate them into one coherent narrative. So those were decisions that we took on the very, 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 very basic structure. The second element was the idea of turning points. For the designers, it was very attractive to divide the galleries by what they considered to be historical turning points. But we know that history is a process, and that turning points is a little bit a schematic. It's a little bit arbitrary. And so we decided not to use turning points as the basis, and especially not to treat, for example, the Khmelnytsky uprising as a turning point, but rather as a cataclysmic event, but as more of a caesura. And this would be much more in keeping with the last 30 years of thinking in the field of the history of Polish Jews. In fact, the whole exhibition should be a tribute to the work that you have done over the last 30 years. And in many ways, I think that it is. And so, and the third was that the 19th century had been divided into two galleries, and we decided to make it into one. So what I'd like to do in the brief time that I have is to essentially show you before and after. So this was a visualization of the medieval gallery. And what I would say is that it is a multimedia, if you will, narrative approach, but it's not a theater of history in the way that we understand a theater of history. And so you can see here that there's probably not a real tombstone, but there's some objects, and there's a kind of treatment that gives you the feeling that you're in a gallery. And if you remember what we got in the medieval gallery, it's really very different. In the case of the medieval gallery, we only have really two objects from this 600-year period that are directly related to the history of Polish Jews. And those are bracteates, one-sided tiny little coins, and tombstones. And so we took a completely different approach. And our approach was to go to our text sources, to the intangible heritage of rabbinical responsa, chronicles, and that kind of material, to extract the stories that are relevant to our larger story, to illustrate them, and to hand paint the walls. It's like walking into a 360-degree, life-size, illuminated manuscript. And the story is organized in space. And that's a principle, that principle of narrative space runs through the entire exhibition. When we come to the next gallery, Paradisus Judaeorum with a question mark, here the Krakow model was going to always be central. But our realization of it, as you know from being in the gallery, is quite different. Here, the idea was that there would be touch screens that would then project up from around the model, which was rather, I would say, sunken. But as you can see, the visual reference material is 20th century photography. And one of our principles was to only use iconographic material from the period, or to create visual material that was inspired by the iconography of the period. And what we don't see here, because of course it's only one visualization, is how all the rest of the content would be organized. And of course this is what we produced. We have the Krakow model, and in fact this is an open plan gallery, and we treat it like a flower. And that is that in the middle, in the heart of the flower, is the Krakow model with an overhead projection, with a topographical scale model, and with interactivity all around it that allows one to explore the content in considerable depth. And then, like petals of the flower, are all the main themes of the gallery. And when you come into the gallery, you can see the gallery as a whole. It was very important for us also to open up the books that in many ways defined what made the age, in quotation marks, golden for Polish Jews, which is the rise of rabbinical authority, learning, Hebrew and Yiddish printing. And we were able to do that in a way that really make our multimedia quite exceptional, because all of our multimedia is unique to the content and is installed in a way that is consistent with the furniture and with the scenography. The Khmelnytsky uprising, which we treat as a brutal caesura between the first half of the Commonwealth period, that is to say 1569 to 1648, and the second half follows a principle we use throughout, which is to narrate through primary sources and through quotations from the period in the original language and in English and Polish translation. Entering the Jewish town, this was how the master plan had envisioned the Jewish town. That is to say that the central feature of it would be a wooden synagogue ceiling, not the one that we finally did, and that looking out from under the synagogue ceiling, one would have a look out to the Jewish town. And given that there is no iconography, well, there is some iconography, but basically here, these are interwar year photographs of marketplaces. And I think that at the master plan stage, there weren't the resources to use period material, but clearly we took a different approach. And the first thing we did, and this was Adam Teller's idea, was to create two centers of gravity for the Jewish town. One would be the marketplace, the other would be the synagogue, and that around the marketplace would be the tavern, the Jewish home, the church, and that around the synagogue would be actually Jacob Frank's story, which is set in the church, and new forms of leadership and spiritual movements that stood in opposition to, if you will, the normative situation. And that took us from heresy, in the case of Frank, through heterodoxy, all the way to Mendel Leffin and the Haskalah, which surrounds the synagogue. But of course, our wooden synagogue was a gift in the sense that it was only in 2007 that we met Hans House Studio and were able to create this incredible wooden synagogue in the way that we did, which was to, in essence, recapture the intangible heritage of how to build such a synagogue in the absence of the original, because all these synagogues were destroyed. It's not possible to have one with the original material, but we were able to recover the knowledge of how to build it by building it with traditional tools, techniques, and materials, and to do so with 300 volunteers and expert timber framers and experts in the conservation of the interiors of Polish churches and other related kinds of interiors. So this, in terms of community outreach, in terms of museum education, in terms of public history, it's the gold standard. And we're probably the only museum of Jewish history that has a church in it, which we're very proud of. And what we've done also with our multimedia is to install it scenographically. Rather than having computer screens and film screens and monitors, we've tried wherever we can to integrate our stories scenographically. Now we come to the long 19th century. And at the master plan stage, this was to be, these are large, if you will, boxes that would carry a lot of multimedia. And my sense is the intention was to communicate the story through projections on these large boxes. And we really came to a very, very different solution. We were fortunate enough to work with a very gifted designer who actually studied theater design, and his name is Arnaud Deschelles from Event Communication. And it's thanks to him that we were able to develop an extremely coherent way of plotting the story in space. And so the, if you will, the long 19th century opens with the partitioning of the Commonwealth. And one of the things we wanted to communicate very clearly is what that means, because it's extremely meaningful, particularly for those who left Poland during the 19th century or before World War I, and really can't figure out where their families came from. If you ever really want to understand it, have a good look at the maps that are around the wall there. And so our solutions to the 19th century are really very, very different from what was imagined. Our train station with this wonderful multimedia that in a very quick way signals the main themes of the second half of the century, and then the emergence of modern forms of Jewish political movements, modern Hebrew and Yiddish culture at the very, very end of the period. Now, the interwar years, how was it imagined at the master plan stage? It was imagined as a street, it was imagined as double height, and in essence, I would say that that fundamentally was preserved, but in a very, very different way, because we created a white relief surface, but we have projected onto this surface, if you will, the street and a whole series of thematic presentations, but essentially that structure, I think, is very, very much intact. Our organization of the street into 4 thematic areas is something that we very much developed after the master plan stage. So politics, culture, daily life, and growing up. And I encourage you, if you haven't had a chance, to go to the upper level of the Interwar Year Gallery. It's really marvelous. It's one of my favorite areas in the entire exhibition, and I really would encourage you to visit it. So this is from part of the upper level. It's essentially inspired by Landkenntnis or Krajoznawstwo, know your country, through hiking and through appreciation of local history and local history monuments. And here we come to a really critical, I would say, principle in our historical narration, and that is that we try to keep our visitors in the moment of the story. We try to tell the story in the historical present, and to the degree that we can, in the first person. And where this becomes extremely important is in the transition from the interwar years to the Holocaust. And so what we've done is to essentially, when you come down the street and you're looking down the street, you don't see the Holocaust. You see people looking up. And it's only when you turn the corner that you see what they're looking up at. And so our narrative approach is really very strategic, and it applies everywhere, but it's especially important here because what we're trying to do in this 1,000-year story is to avoid the teleological drive to the Holocaust, the sense that the Holocaust was inevitable, and that the whole story is just basically a lead-up to the Holocaust. And we think that this is a very, very important message. Now, this is how the master plan envisioned the Holocaust Gallery. And in large measure, the story was being told within a scenography of the Warsaw Ghetto. And I really remember discussions very early on in our post-master plan process where there was a question as to whether the gallery should only be about the Warsaw Ghetto or whether it should be about the Holocaust in Poland. And of course, we opted for the Holocaust in Poland. Now, the Warsaw Ghetto is a very prominent part of this gallery, but it's not the whole gallery. The opening is across Poland. The Aryan Street is across Poland. Hiding is across Poland. The Barbarossa campaign is across Poland. So, but we are a site-specific museum. We're sitting on the site of the Warsaw Ghetto. And so as a site-specific museum, also we use the principle of pars pro toto, the part for the whole. We'd rather take one part, one case, one example, and develop it well than to have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So this is essentially the way in which the scenography was imagined. And then, of course, our really, I would say, narrative space mode looks very different. And our principle of narrating from the primary sources in the original language, and in this case, we have two heroes, Czerniaków and Ringelblum, and we hear from them from their diaries is a point-counterpoint. In other words, it's a multi-voiced story, and that, I think, is another very, very important principle. We come now to the post-war years gallery, and this is where I think probably is the biggest difference. And it's something I think would be very worth debating and thinking about in the days ahead. The post-war years gallery was, of course, to include the rubble, which we do, but not quite in the way that's shown here, and to include the part that would deal with post-war in Poland, but most of the gallery was going to deal with Polish Jews who left, and it was going to essentially be a gallery of 500 faces of Polish Jews in the United States and in Israel. And so you can even see from these schematic diagrams that post-war years gallery, the story of Jews in Poland would be relatively small, and the story of Jews abroad would be relatively big. And we opted for a very, very different approach. Our approach was that the post-war years gallery would be about the post-war years in Poland, and that the story of Jews abroad, what I call expanded geography, would be a story that we would tell in the circulation space that connects all the galleries. Because that's a story that has to do with the history of migration, and it did not begin in the post-war years. And so here you can see our scenographic approach. It's still very much inspired by the master plan, but it's also very, very different. And the way in which we present violence, which again is a multi-voiced story, is something I hope that you will really have a close look at. And I would encourage you to go behind this installation and to get the full story and to explore also what's on the walls. We have really, I would say the Post-War Years Gallery has probably, it's a relatively small space, but it has very deep time because it has a lot of time-based media, a lot of film, a lot of interactivity. And now that visitors are there, we can really get a sense of how they're using the space and how we conclude. We conclude with the period after 1989 and the renewal of Jewish life on a small scale, an opportunity for the first time really to meet Jews who are living in Poland here today, because we do not use survivor video testimony in the Holocaust Gallery, but also to try to come to grips with the enormous, I would say, Jewish presence in Polish consciousness, of which this museum itself is an expression, and also I would say that the Jewish studies, the proliferation of books, films, exhibitions, concerts, festivals are all evidence of enormous interest in Jewish history, Jewish culture, in Jewish topics, including some of the most difficult ones. The openness of public debate around the most difficult issues over the course of the last 15 years, whether it's Jedwabne or it's Kielce or it's the convent at Auschwitz, whatever it might be, these are hot topics, they are widely and deeply debated, and they are part of what we think of as Jewish presence in Polish consciousness. And so with that, I invite you to continue to visit the core exhibition any moment you can find between sessions. And I very much look forward to the discussion of the state of the field and the future directions. And I hope that you see the fruits of your labors over the last 30 years expressed in this core exhibition. Thank you.